everybody. Welcome to Life on Mars again. Àlex, thrilled to have you here. And as we announced, we're bringing back the podcast. And as we announced too, this is one of the episodes that we had recorded a few months back, but that didn't see the light of day. I think the content is evergreen, anyways, and because in this episode we're talking to Brian Farrell from the Farco Design Studio, one design studio that we got very close and to in the last months, if not years. We respect them very much. We think they are a company to look up to. They have very, very similar values as the ones we have here at MarsBased. They're super boutique. They work for mostly American clients, but they run from Spain. And we compare models, but more than anything, this conversation is about the shift in the market that I have been preaching about in the last months, where we have to sell more and more often because we are not able to sell retainers anymore, or companies aren't able to sign retainer contracts anymore. Projects are being canceled, downsized, postponed. So at the receiving end of all these projects, the providers, the companies like MarsBased, like Farco, we are not having the best time of our lives. To be honest, most competitors, similar companies that we have here in either in Barcelona or internationally have shut down, downsized. They have had to let go a lot of people. That's not our case, but it's true. It's becoming a real struggle to sell projects and to have a prediction of what's going to happen in the next 3 months. And that's not ideal. So we discussed this with Brian. We discussed sales. We discussed leadership, communication, company culture, and how to run a boutique company. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our friend, Brian Farrell.
Brian, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing good.
We're live on Mars, the podcast of MarsBased. We almost worked together on a project. We got to know you guys because of a joint proposal we launched for a potential client. Unfortunately, that didn't go through, but we like your company so much. I feel like there's many parallelisms between Farco and MarsBased, and we want to give voice to this kind of companies because we don't get the press, we don't get media coverage, we don't get all of these attention that all the VC-backed companies get. So maybe start introducing Farco and how did it start and what you guys do.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we were really excited about potentially partnering with you guys as well, and hopefully we'll get to find an opportunity in the future to do so. But at least we got connected to share knowledge and beers, at least, since we both like craft beer. So we are in our fourth year at Farco. I'm an American. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I was all up and down the East Coast, different agencies my whole career. And about 9 years ago, the bank BBVA, who has a headquarters here in Madrid, was starting their digital transformation. So they did a global talent search and they were bringing over a lot of different Americans at senior positions. And I just happened to be one of them. So at the time I was living in Washington, DC, working for a digital agency and then ultimately moved over to Madrid to start and lead the design team internally at the bank. And I was there for 4 years. It was this magical time at the start of their digital transformation where they were putting a lot of investment and visibility into design and innovation. We were able to really change everything at the bank, from the methodologies to down to digital, all the different digital products, to the identity. But it was really the main goal there was shifting the internal culture from design as this entity of production to really design is at the center of the culture of the company. And I think that was really the beautiful shift that we saw. And I think ultimately towards the end, when I, at least of my time there in 2020, BBVA was really looked at as sort of this reference towards digital transformation. They were one of the first ones that actually put high investment into it. And so I ultimately, at the end of the 4 years, just felt like we had changed most of the stuff, and my time was, my work there was done. I was looking for a new challenge. I was thinking about potentially asking and finding a US agency that would want to open a office in Spain, because I think part of something I realized before moving to Spain was that it wasn't really on the radar of creative circles in the United States. We often thought about really big creative hubs in the US, but outside of the US, we would think of London and Berlin. Sometimes we would talk about Tokyo, but no one was talking about Spain. So when I took the role at the bank, and I knew I had to grow like a really large creative team, um, I was unsure because I didn't know any of the creative community of product designers or developers. And so that was one of the I think most beautiful surprises that I had in terms of moving here, was getting connected to all of these really talented communities. And so for me, that was sort of like what sparked the idea, is how do I bring together all of the most talented designers and developers that are within these different communities and put it on the global radar, particularly in the United States, because that's sort of where my network is. And so at first I was thinking about just going to one of the agencies that I had worked for and presenting this idea of, okay, well, why don't you come over to Spain and open up an office? And then ultimately what I decided was, well, why not just go at it myself and see if I can do it myself? So that is ultimately what I decided to do, and that's what has led us to here 4 years later.
But yeah, you didn't do it alone, right? So take me back to the first days of Farco. Who did you create it with, and how did you convince him?
Well, so the very first day of the studio was the first day of our confinement here in Spain for COVID. So I think it was
Oh wow,
like,
talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
timing.
it was crazy. Well, I mean, I think you look at that and you're like, oh, that was like horrible timing. But when you really look back at it, like I had no overhead. I had no office, no employees. I had no clients, but it wasn't as stressful. I think for me as a business owner, it was a lot less stressful than actually having a business at that point, because I didn't, like I was saying, I had zero expenses. And then it gave me a good 3, 4 months where the whole world was basically paralyzed just to talk to people and network. And I think it actually ended up being great because everyone was locked in their homes. I was able to get in touch with um, investors and venture capitalists and equity people and CEOs of other agencies, because we had so much free time. We were all stuck at home. And so I got to talk and get connected with a lot of people during those first 3, 4 months. And I really just took the pressure off. It wasn't about making money and getting clients. It was just about like talking to a lot of people and learning. And then ultimately what happened was, sort of towards the end of 2020, um, I was, I mean, obviously the case study of BBVA helped me a lot in terms of finding our first clients, which ultimately was Repsol, which is, a really large energy client here in Spain, who um, was trying to undergo and start their own digital transformation. Um, and ultimately how it started was I had gotten connected with the head of design there. She had asked me to participate in a pitch for their main commercial website. And I remember I was like a one-man team at that point. And so I had my slot in the calendar to pitch our proposal, mine
Our,
proposal.
yeah,
And I
it's always
remember
our, right? When you, me and my company,
Oh,
our.
she literally wrote me, and she goes, because like in the invite, which was like all the heads of the different departments of Repsol, and it was just me. And she was like, "Can you invite other people from your company to this meeting? It looks like," because they were talking with all of these, like the big digital agencies of Madrid, and they're all pretty well known, but they, were bringing their head of technology and head of design and head of strategy. And it was just like Brian Farrell in the invite. And I was like, I can't, I'm like a one-man team right now. So I pitched,
Oh, you told them.
no, I told her, I was like, listen, I'm just like a one-man person at this time. I'm putting together a really good team. I think we'll do a really good job for you. But at this point, I don't have, it's just me. And so anyways, I went into the pitch. I pitched our proposal. I didn't win it. Obviously, they wanted to go with a more credible agency, or at least one that was around for a little bit longer. But they really liked my proposal. And so what happened was, it's like maybe a month later, a month and a half later, she called me back up and she was like, the agency that we went with is not doing a good job. You have 2 weeks to show us what you can do. And the thing that sort of was like, just, I don't know, it just worked out time wise, because like right before that, I had asked my partner to come on. He was a guy that I had hired at BBVA. He was like one of the best designers and just best people in terms of thought and creativity that I had worked with. And I'd asked him to come join me. We didn't have any clients at the time, but I just said, listen, let's take a risk. I'll hire you for 2 months. Let's just see if we can drum up business together. And literally the day he started was the day I got the email from Repsol saying, you have 2 weeks, show us what you can do. And so it just like that, ultimately, that timing was just perfect for us, because like the two of us worked for those 2 weeks, put together like an incredible proposal of how we would shift their commercial website, and we won the project. And that sort of like really sparked the whole company, because after that was our first project in the studio, was like the main commercial website of this energy giant of Spain. And then that just turned into like, we redesigned really all of their different digital touch points. And then, that sort of like steamrolled into hiring employees and getting new clients. And so.
But the real reason why they hired you is because you could invite two people to the conversation this time around.
Yeah, I know. I do find myself, I do think it was funny, because it was like, I was like, I don't know, going on that. Sometimes I feel like I I'm not one to not do something out of fear, and a lot of times fear provokes me to actually do something even more, because I don't know. I don't like making decisions or not doing something based out of fear. And so like I do remember myself in that meeting with them, and it was in Spanish. Obviously, I was trying to present our ideas in proposal in Spanish, and obviously that's not even my native language, and it's secondary to me. But it all works itself out.
But it's funny. What a coincidence that your first client was Repsol. It's our last client we just signed with Repsol right now. So this is kind of like the news I can bring to this episode. But it's weird though that such a big client would sign a company that was emerging, right? Because usually these big corporations, they have their procurement processes, and you have to undergo this like 3-month cycle of talk to this person, these others, send certificates, send you have to comply with this, with that, minimum revenue, minimum years of existence. So if you haven't been around for 5 years, big corporations not going to hire you. Probably in design they make more exceptions, but at least in development is I know we started getting a lot of corporates to contact us in year 5. Before year 5, we worked for 2 or 3 of them, but we were kind of like the exception, right? Because where there is a process, there's also a workaround, right? Where there is a procurement process, there's always a fast tracking. Oh, we really need you. Then we did that for Orange, we did that for a banking institution, we did that for another corporate here and there. But usually it's like, oh no, you need to be like 5 years old as a company. You need to do at least 1 million in annual revenue to make sure that you're a legit company. They didn't have these requirements for, maybe it was because COVID, there were looser requirements, or just because in design, usually they don't have that.
I don't know if it was a matter of like pre or post COVID, because I didn't have a business pre-COVID, but there's definitely a procurement process, and we had to go through and present, legal paperwork in terms of employee requirements or security requirements, all of that kind of stuff. But it was never around the solvency of the company. Now we have lost pitches here in Spain, particularly uh, related to the government because of solvency in our early years, because we just didn't have enough revenue to participate. But the corporations that we've worked with, and we've really only worked with corporations here in Spain since the beginning, we've never lost or not been able to work with one of them because of revenue or our
Okay.
age. And I think maybe it is because of, I mean, we were always the door, our entrance was always design, and particularly related to design system. Many of our contracts here in Spain are like designers over a year, where they will go in and be part of the team to help evolve a design system or a specific digital product. So I don't know if it's because of that type of contract or if it's the department within the company, but um, our size or age has never really limited us here in Spain in terms of working with really large corporations.
As an American, you probably face this cultural shock of you had an upper hand on negotiation, perhaps, or adoption of risk, whereas Spaniards are typically more risk averse, right? And probably when you said, I am not one to calculate my decisions based on the fear factor, right? And so a Spaniard would be like more conservative, perhaps. Um, and so maybe these, I'm not saying this is the fake it till you make it, right? Because you're super transparent about I'm a one-man show. I'm just putting up together this business. But another person could probably say like, yeah, right? Because we are a team, we're a company, and we got these credentials. And you also had one ace up your sleeve, which was the great work that you did at BBVA. So probably those credentials played in your favor. But I don't know, in comparison, when we started, I felt I took a different approach. And maybe because I I had more imposter syndrome, and that's something I still suffer from 10 years in. Don't get me wrong, but like I didn't play my credentials from past companies because I didn't want to be associated to Deloitte and other companies that worked for in the past. And like I really don't want to have anything to do. But probably they would have won us projects in certain cases because it's large projects and whatnot. And we're starting with a blank slate at MarsBased. That was probably that detrimental the first year. So how did you play these cultural differences? And do you think that you had also an advantage because there's the typical fascination for America here, right? You hire an American, you'll pay twice as much for exactly the same work, but just because it's an American, it's kind of like hiring IBM. Nobody gets fired for doing so, right? What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, I'm sure all of those factors played in. Definitely, as an American working in the Spanish system and having succeeded here and lasted, because a lot of times, like I was saying back in 2016 when BBVA was starting their transformation, they brought over a lot of Americans at the same time, all at like really high levels: CMO, COO, head of product, all of those. And after 2 years, like there was maybe I think 12 to 15 of us. Um, After 2 years, I was the only American left. I was the only one that really assimilated, or at least merged cultures with the Spanish work system. And so I think that also speaks to, and probably gives me some type of credentials here in Spain. The fact that I've lasted and been successful in the Spanish system. But I think it's also one of those things where I've realized that the merger of American and Spanish culture is such a beautiful fusion. And it's like the absolute best cultural um, fusion that I've seen, because I feel like the standard image you have in American is this like super ambitious, goal oriented, career driven person. And I think also the image you have of a Spaniard is like this person who really places value on work life balance, and they really understand the value of disconnecting, which I also think is like so important. And so when you like merge those two cultures, you get these these people who are super passionate both about work and life, and you get people who are career oriented but also diverse in their interests because they're not so singularly focused. And so I've always really valued this fusion because I've also seen how it has evolved me as a person and how I approach life. But also now at Farco, we place a heavy emphasis on merging these cultures. So we work significantly with the United States. We work significantly with bringing teams of Americans together with our team here and creating these distributed teams, diverse teams of working together, because that ultimately I think is that fusion is so beautiful, and it's so apparent with these teams that are working together.
It's funny because in here we have, you know, certain similarities, I would say, because I mean, mm, I s- I spent a month a year in San Francisco in the Valley. That's where we kind of like absorb some of the ideas that then we implemented in the company. We created the company in 2014, but conceptualized it a couple years late before, and so we were kind of like one of the first companies to bring in such a super cohesive idea of company culture. Back in 2014, nobody was talking about company culture in Spain. Nobody knew what that meant. There were no remote companies, or very few of them, certainly no office list companies, right? So I understand this. And as somebody who sells also to Americans, that they appreciate that we are not the typical Spanish, and not only Americans. I mean, I've heard that from several other countries, like, you know, UK, Sweden, Finland, all of these other countries also have got this image of Spain, like good for partying and holidays, but not for business. We all know that. We know the stereotype. Our role here is to help to dilute this stereotype and just make it so that, you know, good business quality can also come from this country, right? But anyways, going beyond that, there's certainly a few aspects that will help, you know, you being native to American, selling to American clients, to speak the same language, but also, you know, the culture, the initial cultural shock is different. The pacing in communications, the wording of the emails, what is expected, regulations, and other non so tangible stuff that you can in a negotiation. You know that probably Americans want to cut to the chase, right? They want to get more. They're pretty efficient about that. As Brits take, you know, longer paths around the negotiation here, talk about the weather, whatnot. Spaniards is, we like to have 17 conversations before the actual contract discussion, right? So there's a lot of these cultural differences matter a lot, but most of your, I assume, that's a question. I assume most of your business comes from the US. So I assume that this cultural affinity or understanding, it's good for your business, because you're like, yeah, no, you don't need to tell me all about this. I know how US corporations breathe. I know how US companies work. I'm American, right? So I guess that helps in the negotiation.
I think definitely. I mean, I think most of our US clients also are people that I've worked with in the past. So there's already a trust built up just through working together. But those that are completely new, I think definitely. I mean, the fact that um, that you would be working with a company that's owned by an American, and that probably has certain cultural behaviors that are similar to those of an American, probably reduces any type of uncertainty of working with a company outside of the United States for sure. But to your point around like bringing back this idea of culture here to Spain from your time in San Francisco, I think is really important. And obviously, I think the industry in general is changing here in Spain, and I think employers are starting to value employees a little bit more. I absolutely love living in Spain. Obviously, I have chosen to live here. I prefer to live here, but I think one of my biggest criticisms from the beginning, and something that I always notice, is it's a little bit of a abusive labor market. And I think where employers were taking advantage and not really valuing or showing value towards their employees. And I think it stems back to your earlier point in terms of like Spaniards really thriving and placing a high importance on stability and security. And I think if you really wanted to get back into like where this stems from, it's 50 years ago you were in a dictatorship, and so I think that's not that long ago.
Spot
And
on. Yeah.
and so like the older generations have always had this mindset of stability, and like if you have a job at a bank or you have a job at a big corporation, like you would never think about leaving it. And I think that's also why, like here in Spain, like one of the most coveted jobs is a government employer, the funcionario. And it's like because you will never lose that job, which like in the United States you would never tell someone you would want to go work for the government. No one wants to work for the government. And
Yeah.
but it's because there's this mindset here of stability, and I think that has also provoked this abusive or more abusive labor market, because employers know that they will never lose that employee, and so they can treat them however they want. And so for me also, what I'm trying to do, and we're super small, and it's not like I'm going to make a big impact on this sort of cultural shift, but I do want to do my part in it. And even though I can make a little ripple in terms of really creating a culture at a Spanish company that places huge importance on valuing the employee and compensating the employee for doing good work, to me is super important. And actually, it it reminds me. Do you know the company Tierra? It's a like a burrito place. Well, so
Where
anyways,
in the US? No,
no, it's here.
or
It's all through. It's
okay.
all through Madrid. There's some. It's basically it's more or less a fast food chain. But for those Americans, it's basically like Chipotle. But it's
Okay.
super successful.
Okay. Oh,
He's a friend of.
Tierra. Yeah, they call Tierra burrito, right? Something like that.
Yeah,
Tierra burrito. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it's like
Totally.
it's a fast
Yeah.
food chain. It's like blowing up here in Spain. And so he's a friend of
Yeah.
mine. He's an American, but he's also bringing over this cultural mindset of career growth within the company and really valuing the employees. And so he told me that he sat down with the head of McDonald's here in Spain, and the guy from McDonald's went to him and he was like, I'm like, you're making me treat my employees better because they're all leaving to go work for you. And I was like, that would be the most beautiful compliment that anyone could ever give me. If like another agency at some point comes to me and says, listen, Brian, like you're making me treat my employees better because, or pay them better because of the way that you're treating your employees, I think is like, that would be hands down like the goal.
We're small raindrops in a big ocean of corporate bullshit, right? And so the rippling effect we can create is relatively small, not to say minuscule, but I think we can have some impact, right? Because it begins in the individual, then we can expand. To your point, this is a brilliant example, and I don't know if that will ever happen to us, but certainly I know that we are changing the industry. Very modestly, but we are, because you guys probably are introducing new design systems to the market. You have introduced more like a boutique approach to design compared to design agencies, to my understanding, which is pretty limited, but I've always conceptualized as something like very boutique, right? There are super big generalist agencies, but because you work in you optimize for creativity, I don't think you can create a kind of like a mold and a kind of like a cookie cutter framework and just replicate it and grow heavily and whatnot, the way big consultancies do or development consultancies do. They're like, I just buy developers and then just do giant roll-ups of different agencies and consultancies and put them all together, and we'll figure out, because we optimize for productivity, not for creativity. Therefore, we can scale this very, very high. And so I think there was more space to grow as a boutique development agency like we did, and to bring this different approach and have no office, optimize for employee happiness and all of that, than for design agencies. I don't know if I'm in the right or I'm in the wrong. What's your perception of these? Your market was what was your differentiation?
Yeah,
with
so
regards to other boutique agencies?
yeah, well, I mean, this insight sort of came to me when I was at BBVA, because even though we were growing a really large internal design team, we were also, there was just too much work, and we had to work with a lot of different vendors, both really big ones and then also really boutique ones. And something I always saw is when we would go with the big ones that could cover all aspects of the project end to end, we would be given the deliverable, and even though we would be able to implement it immediately into our systems, we are always left like, "Ugh," like the quality is like average. And so we would go in and have to like elevate the quality and design of it. And then when we would work with the smaller boutiques, which I love supporting and loved working with them because the creativity was so beautiful, we would be given the final deliverable, and even though the quality was amazing, it was clear they had no idea around large systems. And so we would have to go in and like reconfigure it in order to implement it into our systems. And so that was sort of like the insight to me, is like, there's this space in the market for a small boutique who is still, main focus is quality, and it's not about, you know, profit and building large teams where you don't really know if you're getting the A team or the D team, but that also knows, how to implement creativity and scale design at a macro level. And so that's really where we're trying to play in the space, in terms of, we're a small team, we're 10 people. And but we're able to do really big work because we know from working at really large corporations how to systemize our design so that it can be implemented in those systems.
I mean, no shit. Your first client was the corporate website of Repsol. Of course, you can fucking do it. But one interesting thing here, when you were talking about this, when you were giving this answer, I had sort of an epiphany about like, oh, exactly, this is what happened to us, right? So I'm ex-Deloitte. I help, building really large projects, and my partners used to work also in big consultancies. And I think that the main thing that we've got in common here as an agency, we're boutique, and we're small because we want to be small. We want to keep it small. We could have MarsBased, we're 10 years old, we're a team of 20. We could have grown to 50 perhaps, right? If we so had wanted, but maybe we would also have suffered setbacks and had to scale down, maybe because of the market downturns, because of crisis, because of large client just switching providers and whatnot. We never wanted this. We wanted to always be smaller than we should be. Very consciously about this, because this way you keep agency, ownership, and quality, and at the same time you've got the best gray matter that you can invest in producing systems at scale, right? Because in the last 24 months, and we discussed this over beers the other time, most of the boutique development agencies, they have disappeared. They either shut down, or because when they went out of business because they got tired, or because they were like, oh, there were tailwinds for so many years, now there's headwinds, and we kind of like, oh, we merged with somebody else. We got tired of this, right? I'm talking about companies like Karumi, like CodeGram, like some other companies that were super boutique, and they specialize in this, and they're like, yeah, after 10 years, we're not going to compete anymore. And my point being, most of these companies, they were extremely good in the technical side, but they were not that great in business. I'm not saying these two weren't. They had really, really large clients, but from the employer's point of view, you at BBVA, you had to choose sometimes between like the large generic Accenture that can give you the end-to-end, and they have the budget, they have their team to start tomorrow, they can produce things at scale, but the quality sucks. And then go for the really niche. I'm not putting these words in your mouth. I'm saying this myself. But then the boutique agency, you're like, yeah, brilliant, looks fantastic, but this doesn't scale. I need 3 more people tomorrow. You guys can't deliver these, right? And so maybe because we have this past in the corporates, you and I, or my partners now, you and your partner too. Then you can conceptualize things differently at the intersection of technology or design and the business, right? You take both things into account. And And I don't know, maybe that's my observation here. So I don't know if you share it or not, but I think that other boutique companies, they just create boutique because they don't know any better. They're super good, they're super technically skilled, but the moment where business comes into play, they're like, I can do that. I'm not interested. I hear that. I'm not interested in business. Chances are you are not going to do very big clients, or you're not going to last for longer, because people appreciate that business savviness, right?
Yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time, for instance, like on measurement plans. So how to measure the design that we're doing for clients. Um,
What does that
so
mean?
I
What does that mean? I'm not familiar with the concept.
so how yeah, so how to measure the value of design. And for instance, a design system of what that we're building for a client, like how to extract metrics even in the first month after launch, and then continually as it grows. Because the business side, and typically a lot of times we'll start our pitch decks with just explaining the value and the ROI of investing in design, through very specific examples and case studies that we now have over the last 4 years with other corporations. Because I still think that there is a learning curve and sort of a hesitation around truly investing in design without understanding how it's going to impact your business.
What would be a good example of these KPIs? So like, what kind of KPI? Like, for instance, that really resonates. I think one of our best portfolios, or two of our best portfolios, are one that a company will help to rebuild their MVP, and we help them to grow their revenue by a factor of 300, something like that, right? Really crazy. 5 years, but they went from something that didn't scale to something that scaled, and now they're a multi-million company, right? Or another one that they sold the company. They managed to sell the company because of the technology we developed for them, right? So we help the company to grow in valuation and have an asset that was worth an acquisition, right? So what would be in design? What would be the KPIs that you're using to measure this against?
Yeah, so like in specific projects, like a commercial website, it would be like increase in lead generation, or sales increase through the platform. When we're talking about design systems, it's um, time to market or introduction into a new market, taking up one product from one country to another country, and what's the increase in time that you're able to launch. It would be even down to the technical side in terms of how fast can you detect an error or bug and fix it. Um, um, how fast are you launching new features using the design team, using the design system? So both time and cost savings, which, ultimately, if you have created a successful design system, that multiplier becomes a very, very big number quickly.
What do you, and I'm kind of like circling back to the distinction between lifestyle businesses and businesses that are, poised for growth. You probably have got also the upper hand on negotiation, and you can cherry pick your customers. It's not always so, or hopefully in your case it is. It hasn't been so for 10 years at MarsBased, but for the most part, we could pick the clients that we wanted to work for, right? And so that gives us a longer, kind of like, not only runway, but it gives you better clients that then you don't have to replace so often, that you build a deeper bond with them and stuff like that. So and while technically lifestyle businesses come across as something not ambitious, mostly in the eyes of Americans, I'm getting these more when I go to American. Oh, yours is a lifestyle business. Oh man, that's easy, right? I wouldn't say like they call us lazy, but it's like, yeah, it's easy. Everybody can build a lifestyle business. That's not ambitious. You will not create impact. You cannot create make a dent in the universe. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but we're 10 years in, making a healthy profit every year. Maybe the company is not very large, but we work for big companies as well. We're healthy. We're not stressed. not balding at 40 years old, and not a lot of gray hair, no divorces, no depression, no, I don't know, all of these health problems that a lot of people in the industry suffer from, right? And I don't know, for me, it is ambitious to create a culture where employees, I don't like the word, there was another word better for talent retention. I think there was, I don't remember right now, but it's kind of like, employees, they have a tenure of 7 to 9 years in our company, which is unheard of. 3 people have left in 10 years, right? Out of the 30 that we have hired. So what is your policy for client choosing, and how do you establish these long-term relationships? Granted that you're 4 years old now, but I'm pretty sure that you still retain the same clients from 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the goal, is particularly in terms of creating financial stability with in a small company, is having retainer clients and long-term relationships, and definitely we try and do that. I think for me also, it's a matter of keeping diversity in the studio so that employees consistently can grow in new areas. So we typically combine really large corporate clients that have will have bigger challenges and more complex systems and bigger teams that require, different ceremonies and workflows, with startup clients that you're working with a really small team. Everyone on the call is the decision maker. You're typically launching in faster faster timelines, because I think the pairing of those two are really interesting, not only for the energy and spirit of a studio, but also in terms of just portfolio cases and a lot of times we're working with cause-related startups. So founders who are trying to start businesses in circular economy or climate or sustainable travel, and so that's a nice pairing with Fortune 500 who's trying to scale their product market.
And how did you get to work with the retainer? Because one of the things you might have observed as an American is Spain doesn't have a big tradition of working with retainers, and even less so in design, like development, because there's the body shopping. Maybe in design you also use the body shopping system, but we in 2014, it was like, I remember we were having the conversation with using retainer system, time and materials. Nobody was having it, and luckily enough, we got hired from companies from Sweden, Finland, UK, Germany, and then we were able to introduce it in Spain. But kind of like going abroad first, and then having clients here who we converted to retainer contracts, right? Maybe coming in at 2020 was easier, or do you have only retainers with American clients and then the fixed bid ones in Spain?
No, we have retainer. I mean, typically the retainer here on the design side is called the implant. So, and the corporation wants to hire however many designers to come ultimately be a part of their internal team. It's something that I started to see when I was working at BBVA. We had a lot of different implants. The problem that I
What's the
see
difference
there is that
between implants and body shopping? Because it sounds like body shopping, isn't it?
I don't know what body shopping is.
Body shopping is, yeah, it's kind of like you're loaning them a few people that then they become internal employees, right? They have their own
It would be the
email,
same
they
thing.
get into their
It
dynamics.
would be
Okay,
it would
okay,
be the same
it's
thing.
body shopping.
So
Okay, okay, okay.
so we call it on the design side like a design implant. And we
Okay.
had a lot of them at BBVA. The problem is that they're never treated as employees. So they don't have a career path, they don't have a career manager, but they're literally there every single day, 40 hours a week, as if they were an internal employee. So they're sort of like left on their own little island, because they're not really connected to the agency that they were contracted through, but they aren't employees either. And so we have this type of role. I mean, we call it more a hybrid, because have them very much connected to our studio as well, where they have a career path, they have a manager within Farco, even though they are 100% assigned to that Spanish corporation as like another internal designer within their team, which I think is really important because it not only is great for that particular designer because then they have a career path, they're growing, but then it's good for the client as well because they're continually bringing new ideas to the table. I think that's one of the benefits of hiring external help is because you want fresh ideas. You don't want someone so bogged down in the internal politics. And so if you can create that dynamic where that implant, or in our case hybrid, has the connection to the exterior world, has the references coming from the studio of other clients, I think that only benefits the end client, the corporation as well. But yeah, I mean, to your point, like we have retainers here in Spain. I would say they're a little bit different in terms of time. I mean, the ones in the US are typically like year-long ones. Those are the contracts. And here we see it's like 6 months, we can get a corporation to like every 6 months we renew it. Sometimes it's like every 13 weeks. So I guess that's the difference.
Okay, yeah, the reason I brought up body shopping is because one of the things that we really didn't want to do with our company, because from the point of view of the provider, we have seen that they alienate the developer, right? Of course, you're like the company is borrowing a couple of developers from you. Sounds good. It's a stable contract. It's year long. Then they pay for full-time employees. It's 2, 3, 4, 5 people if you want. Sounds good in principle, but then in practice, these people don't feel part of the client, but also they don't feel part of your company, right?
That's
I remember like clients, they want to have body shopping because like, no, because I want them to be part of our company. They will be invited to like our company days. They'll have our email to be on our Slack and all of that. It's like, yeah, but then they don't have the benefits that your employees have. They don't get like, they don't have to go. I mean, sometimes they want them to go to the office, which is something as a remote company we don't do. But don't get me wrong. I think they want the best part of it, but they don't want the worst part of it, which is like, yeah, I mean, you will not have this person really. You just want to kind of like lease them if you want, right? And for us as a provider, that person would feel super disconnected from our team too. That's why in this case, we don't do it. And what we do is like the same approach that you guys have. Like the management happens here internally in MarsBased. They are on our tools. They're on the client tools as well, but they participate in our team dynamics. Like we do a company get together, they come to our event. The client does a company get together, they don't go to that event, right? And so they still feel very connected. That's the way that we can optimize for employee longevity, right? So that's
very good. Yeah. I mean, but I think it's like about, I mean, in our case, it's like a true hybrid. I mean, they participate in both companies' events but the mentorship happens on our end. But I think what's really important is to communicate this at the beginning when you're going into these types of relationships with corporations where they want this type of implant. To be very clear is like, this is how it works on our end. These are the benefits of why we do it this way. And also the concept of rotation, because I think people who want to work on the agency side, they do that because they want visibility and contact with different clients. And so they have purposely chosen not to work in-house at a corporation. And so, but when a corporation hires this type of profile, they think it is forever. They want it to be like an employee because of the integration into their internal teams. And so I think the challenges that I've seen is when you go back to a corporation and say, listen, it's time for a rotation. This profile needs to move on to another project and another client. And if that idea has not been pre-communicated, I think that's where you arise at some problems. But I do believe that like the idea of rotation is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think like from the buyer's perspective, right? From the client perspective, it's like I hire an agency so that they give me continued support, like 40 hours per week. no downtime. The employee will never leave. Once they acquire the knowledge of the platform, it will never go down, right? And I mean, if you did that internally and the employee leaves, then you would lose it anyways. Like, it's
Yeah.
only natural that in an agency, the developer can also quit the company, and there will be some
Yeah.
downtime. Like, for instance, the way we minimize this is we have a minimum of 2 people in the project. So it would be very, very big coincidence that the 2 of them or 3 of them, 5 of them, they left at the same time. There's always like a manager and a tech lead, and then the developer, by minimum standards, so that if the developer quits, there's the tech lead who has centralized, also store the knowledge of the platform, and then we minimize the. You can always present some KPIs, like we minimize the ramp up adaptation period, or the creativity and productivity. It decreases after a year. We have calculated a year and a half. That's when we typically have a rotation policy of 18 months. But yeah, if the client and the developer are happy, and in some cases we had people 5 years in the same project because both of them, they wanted each other in the project. They wanted the developer wanted to stay. But kind of like to wrap up, I've got a couple questions also. I always ask to everybody, because we were fully transparent with these, and we like to have other examples on the show, which is worst day at the office. Like, because it sounds very rosy, it sounds dreamlike, and but it's not always like this. And even though bootstrap businesses, typically we have less or fewer lows than highs, we do have them sometimes. What has been your worst day at the office with Farco?
Well, the thing is that, like, I'm a designer by training, and before this role as a business owner, I was always like, even though in very high positions later on in my career, but like very specific to projects. And so my 40 hours a week were very specific and dedicated to project work and very specific tasks. And then when I stepped into this role, I'm not on projects. My responsibilities and role definition is completely different in terms of like business development and networking, and it's not like so natural, and it was not so natural for me. And so my worst days were those where I didn't feel productive, and it was because I didn't necessarily have to work an 8-hour day. I mean, there's only so much new business development you can do, but I wasn't used to not being completely busy for a full 8 hours. And so it was like that. It was recalibrating my mindset to feeling productive in a new way. And honestly, I mean, one of the conversations that I've had recently with another agency owner that really brought me so much peace was him saying, like, Brian, I only do 3 or 4 hours of work a day. That's all that's needed of me. And I spend the rest of my time doing other stuff. And he has a super successful agency. And it was this eye-opening moment where it was like, okay, like, you don't have to work an 8-hour Monday to Friday type of, this is not your job anymore. It's much different. And so I think having that in mind, and knowing that how I do my work and when I do my work is not on the same time schedule as before, was has really helped me out.
Um, yeah, it's a really good point. Actually, makes me think that I'm on purpose. I'm trying to work fewer hours per day, because even though it sounds counterproductive, because working less means probably less revenue, right? But then you increase another KPI, which is you're more creative, and then you focus more on the things that matter, right? I know I could feel my house with tasks, right? I've got tasks that have been pending for 6, 12, 18 months. Sometimes I see some things on linear or on my task management systems, like this task was created in 2018. Like, for fuck's sake, it's still there, but because we got so many things, chief everything officer, right? That doesn't
Yeah.
mean it has to be done. So my new framework is completion by ignoring, right? Which is, some tasks are best left ignored. If they disappear, they were not really important. If they are really important, they will come back twice, right? I'm not saying you should be doing this with everything, but most of the things we do it just because we think we have to do it. And we could outsource them, we could automate them, we could, eliminate them altogether. And I think that's one of the risks that we as first time founders that we incur in, because we're just not used, and we're like, oh no, I'm not going to hire somebody to do this stuff. He's going to charge me 300 euro. Like, what's 300 euro? Probably your hourly fee as a founder of Farco is way higher than that. Of course, you should be hiring a person, but in your mind, it goes against your profit, right? And that's why, and you still have got the mentality of really small business owner, and it's one of the things that we have to battle against. How about, were you any close to shutting down your business? Were there like any periods in time that you were like, well, short of money, or?
No, I mean, like you said, we've always been bootstrapped, and we've always grown organically based on the clients that have come in. And like I was saying, we sort of had it easy from the beginning because we started with really big clients. But I will say that like last year, first quarter, when everyone was concerned about the economy, and our clients were not opening up their budgets and reducing headcount, and I mean, we didn't make any profit in the first quarter of 2023. And so that was like probably the most challenging period. And I think for me though, looking back on it, because we had started off on such good footing from the very beginning, um, I'm almost glad that that happened, because it sort of gave me perspective on what a challenge looks like, how to prepare for it, and most importantly, that we can survive it. It also has sort of like calmed me down a little bit as a business owner, because I think particularly because I'm new to this, like I always think we're gonna fail. Like I just have this mindset of like we could fail any day, which really, really stressed me out. And so having gone through that period where, we really didn't make any profit at all. We weren't at a loss, but we didn't make it wasn't a successful quarter at all. Has sort of given me sort of like peace of mind, and also confidence in terms of if it happens again, it's not going to be the end of our company.
Since you shared, I'm going to be sharing as well. We had a similar situation in Q2 last year, right? And that contract we didn't land, and where we were supposed to do that, we had doubled down on sales on that project. It would have been a very big project for us, and then we completely took the attention away from other sales processes, which, in hindsight, we shouldn't have. And then because we didn't land the project, all of a sudden we had to not half of the team, but a significant part of the team without project, and then we had to go back to these clients that we have left unattended for a while, or potential clients. So like, look, this happened. We're super transparent. A couple of them ended up hiring us, so we managed to turn the situation around. But that quarter, I mean, we don't measure quarterly profit. I don't know if that's something that you guys do, and I think that's pretty clever. But it could have been pretty disastrous if we hadn't reverted the situation. So it also that situation of like being at peril for a while. It's like, wow, you guys should get this fixed. And I think it was also like a kind of like a wake up call for the company. And I think it was positive. Last question before we wrap it up, because we're running out of time. It's what was your most expensive fuck up, and can you quantify it in money?
Yeah, I mean, you had mentioned this yesterday, so I was trying to think about like what is
the first time we prepare. I have to say, first time we prepare with this question.
Yeah, it was like, what is a fuck up that I could talk? And thankfully, at least at Farco, there hasn't been a fuck up that I can quantify. But I will say that in my career, a big fuck up was particularly related to, I started in design studios in New York City, where back in 2003, where most of it was print related. And so going on press check and sending a client through with an error and having to reprint definitely happened many different times and cost tens of thousands of dollars. And quite honestly, one of the biggest pieces of advice I give to any designer going into particularly the digital space now is find a client, a freelance project that will require you to go on press check, because it creates a sense of um, detail and preciseness that is so important, that I think designers that go directly into the digital space don't have, because it's so easy to correct bugs. You just go over to your developer and say, code this differently. That I see a lack of refinement and attention to detail on designers that haven't necessarily gone through the more physical print related industry.
I'm not laughing because of your fuck up. I'm laughing because coincidentally, and I haven't heard this story, I'm drinking tea from a cup that happens to have a typo. You know, that's our
See,
slogan. Can you read? Instead of
is it
alien,
supposed to be
it reads
alien? Yeah.
alien. It, I think 6 different people saw the design, but we didn't see this typo. Right?
Yeah.
So, and we printed like, I don't know, 50, like we made 50 of these coffee mugs. And when they arrived, like when they were shipping it, by reviewing it before receiving them, I was like, oh, by the way, I think there's a typo here. Like they're arriving today. Like, so we had to reprint them and we had to remake them. And we sent them, anyways, we sent the wrong one and the fixed one to the team as a reminder that everybody fucks up, because it was the designer fucked up, but then the head of people reviewed it. She didn't say it. The 3 founders reviewed the designs for other merch, and this one in particular, we didn't see it, and somebody else was involved, didn't see it either. So 6 different people didn't see this typo, you know. So I think it's a great example of that this printing, you know, this printing check, it's very good. Brian, you've been extremely generous with your transparency and sharing your wisdom nuggets and your experience and your time. I want to give you 30 seconds to kind of like, I'm rolling the carpet for you, say how we can help you and Farco. If you got something coming up in your life, business-wise, that you want to announce, just do it here. Ask for a favor to the community.
Great. So, I mean, I think our vision is to continually put Spain on the global radar. So that really is the essence of what we're trying to do. So if you're in a market outside of Spain, think of the talent that's here, because it is really incredible. And these fusions of culture, I tell you, are creating not only diverse, interesting teams, but super fun to work with. So that's basically all I have to say.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.